Hello everyone, and welcome back to another installment of Game Squabble. I'm your host, Gaming Compass, and today we're going to talk about the fact that Pikmin 4 was just announced. It could be a similar story to Pikmin 3, where it was pretty much vapor for, good 8 years, 9? They didn't even talk about it that much. They said it was in development. Who knows, this could be coming out on Nintendo's home console after the NX.
I'm Shigeru Miyamoto.
Yeah, alright.
Today, I'd like to talk a little bit about Pikmin.
Yeah?
Oh my god.
We're still
Oh my
working
god.
on the series.
Oh my god.
Oh no.
This
Oh.
is a smart device.
This guy gaslit so hard.
I might not watch the rest of this direct.
To play it. Now to the main event.
There we
Let's take a
go.
look
Come
at
on.
this.
Come on. Pikmin 4. Let's go. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on.
Mario
Please.
movie.
Yes! let's
Okay,
go.
okay, let's go.
What's it like a DLC or something? Which should actually make me mad. But
Oh, I would not. Oh, it's
This looks
Pikmin
re-
4?
this looks so good. Please, please, be Pikmin 4.
Let's go! Let's
It looks
go!
fucking good. Holy shit, it's gonna look so good. Yeah.
Pikmin 4, guys. I'm not gonna lie, I thought this game was either dead or turned into Hate Pikmin, and I don't know what would have been worse. Pikmin 4, for the better part of 10 years, was a complete and utter mystery. The first time we heard of it at all was in a 2015 interview. You know, you can't help but look at his name here and just feel bad for the guy. I wonder what he thinks about all the sheer chaos this interview led to on the internet. I mean, he might be in government witness protection for all we know now. A new Pikmin game would release in 2017 on the 3DS, being, hey, Pikmin, please stop making me talk about this thing. This was the spin-off era of Nintendo, like it or hate it. No one liked these pitiful piles of piss, but hey, buy this game unless you want your franchise to die. GB Robo never recovered. Hey, Pikmin is fine, but it's so fine that it may as well have not existed, and definitely wasn't the Pikmin game people were looking for when they thought of 4. From there was complete radio silence on the future of the franchise until summer 2020. This was a unique summer. I don't think I need to say why, there's a few reasons. Nintendo had not done any traditional directs this year as a result of the pandemic, and their game output wasn't great. You got Xenoblade Definitive Edition, Clubhouse games, and that. It wasn't a great year, but announcements would slowly trickle in via Twitter. Twitter. Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity was shadow dropped, and after a long 7-year wait, it was finally time for what the fan base truly wanted and deserved. Pikmin 3 Deluxe. Hi, my name is Jeff. Thank you for including me at the Nintendo Shills Anonymous meeting. I like buying Nintendo games twice, I'm not gonna lie. But you know what? It was still a great game. Pikmin 3 as a whole I'm kinda mixed on, but the deluxe version added quite a bit to the package. All the DLC was included, it came with 2 new campaign chapters with Olimar and Louie, as well as the addition of a co-op mode. The next few years were interesting though. Pikmin just kept showing up. It was persistently in the forefront of Nintendo's advertising and brand recognition. I remember fans were getting excited about seeing Pikmin and thinking, well, the franchise can't be dead at this point. And it may sound like a big old huff of copium, but it was important to note that in 2014, Miyamoto had inferred that if they were working on projects promoting the franchise, then new games would eventually come to fruition. So I relished in Pikmin being an IP again. Pikmin Bloom, a walking application released for mobile phones, was more than a cheap cash grab. It was just mostly a cheap cash grab, but really, it was a marketing vehicle for the future of the franchise. And finally, in September 2022, the gods of Nintendo Direct would grace us with a Nintendo Direct. I don't know what else you wanted. This Direct f***ing sucked. Off topic, but there were like 10 farming simulators or generic cheap RPGs. I'm not exaggerating. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But there were nuggets of good information bundled in here. We learned the title of the next Zelda game being Tears of the Kingdom, and now everyone knew why this Direct was delayed in the UK. About halfway in, Miyamoto would come on the screen. Now you have to understand that the Super Mario movie campaign had just begun, so when I saw this, I told my friends I was reacting with, it's just to talk about the Mario movie, relax, I got this.
Today, I'd like to talk a little bit about Pikmin.
Oh my god, okay, everyone shut up. Everyone shut up right now. He then talked about Pikmin Bloom. I think the internet agreed this was a giant troll and it's funny, but I think in some jurisdictions I might label this as emotional abuse. But alas, Pikmin 4 was finally revealed, with about 5 seconds of in-engine footage. While that might seem like a small reveal, I was super appreciative, because the game was real. It exists, and it looks damn good. This wasn't just some, Pikmin 4 is coming, or Metroid Metroid Prime 4-like announcement, this was it. Pikmin 4 was finally coming in 2023. It was only 8 years since the last announcement. So Nintendo chose to do something basically unheard of as it pertains to one of their smaller franchises. They actually promoted it. Pikmin 4. Did you know Pikmin 4 is a game? Pikmin water bottles, Pikmin stickers, Pikmin ice cube trays, Pikmin coffins. Okay, I made that last one up, but seriously, there were commercials and advertisements, and I know most fans get this kind of stuff all the time, and it might seem weird, like, oh, why do you care about advertisements? But Pikmin fans, we didn't know what to do with ourselves. It was a big deal. And it paid off, with the game selling pretty respectable numbers. I think, I don't know, at the time I'm writing this, all we have is the fact that it outsold Pikmin 3 Deluxe 4-1 in Japan, and was #1 on a bunch of eShops, and I consider that respectable. Alright, enough screwing around. Pikmin 4, it's time. Booting up the game, you know, I can't get over the fact that this game actually exists. Like, it's kind of just surreal. I mean, if you think about it, we waited 10 years for this game. That's a long time. I mean, old pieces of the Mario Kart 8 video being like, oh, it's 10 years. It's basically the same amount of time. I mean, I kind of worry for the game in a way, because it's either not going to live up to expectations, just because when something's out that long, you never really know if people will be that wise to it. So I hope we can enjoy it on our own merits here. All right, let's go into this with an open mind. Don't go into it with a closed mind. So right off the bat, we have a situation that definitely is going to piss off some fans. Good start. We see Olimar telling the story of his situation, all about how he crash landed on a mysterious planet. Now, at a first glance, you might think this is a callback to a little-known game called Pikmin 1. Yes, it's Pikmin 1 now, not just Pikmin. Get over it. It's been officially renamed. Anyways, that seems like a cute callback, right? Except as the story goes on, the little things don't add up. Like, for one, I don't remember this dog that appeared, or the frickin' faucet in the background. You might think this is just a separate crashing incident, but here we learn this is Olimar's first interaction with Pikmin. Huh. And that's the dolphin, by the way, the ship from Pikmin 1. So, look, we're gonna give this its due time later on, trust me, but we need a lot more context and information to fully dissect this. So for now, let's just ignore it. Who cares? Apparently a lot of people, judging by good old Twitter. From here, we get to play as Captain Olimar for a bit, serving as the game's first tutorial. And I think that's a cute idea. This tutorial really got me excited and ready to play the game. Like, look, I'm playing Pikmin. I'm in some house using a dog to crash into vases, and I'm finding ship parts again. I mean, this is freaking cool, dude. Anyways, Olimar f***ing dies, and the captain who is sent in to rescue him is none other than you. I guess me, us, all of us combined. This introduces the series' first full-fledged character creator. It's not the most expansive avatar maker I've ever seen, though, and there's some bizarre exclusions. Like, look at these hair colors. What am I, an e-girl? Where's brown? I guess there's yellow. It's kind of a hair color. It's not like Pikmin people don't have brown hair either. Look at Olimar. So it really makes no sense. But all in all, I can sit here and piss on it, but I found this creator super cute and fun. I like it more than making Mii's. Don't kill me. We finish, and okay, we crashed. You know, we find out from Shepard, yes, that's her name, Shepard, I don't get it either, that there are 99 generations of adventurers. 99! This is the same time period as Olimar, so if a generation is like 20 years, that's 2,000 years, and yet every Pikmin captain ever just crashes the ships like they're freaking go-karts. You guys really, you all suck. Anyways, yeah, we don't just have to save Olimar now, we have to save all of these clowns too. The next 2 hours of the game are... okay, look, let's just get this out of the way now, because I know if I start a review like this with a negative tone, especially with the title, the video, people are gonna think I hate this game, and I absolutely do not. I love this game more than any future children I'll have. But holy pick carrots, this tutorial is so hand-holdy and so drawn out and text-heavy that if I wasn't a fan of this franchise, I honestly don't know if I would have really been that enthralled to continue the game. To be completely fair, there's a decent chunk you can skip just by pressing start. As a reviewer, I don't have the luxury of doing that because I aim to set out to see as much content as I possibly could of this game, and I want to be engaged, I want to meet the buffoons, I want to be in the frickin' Pikmin world. In general, I'm not really a fan of games with tutorials that go over 15, 20 minutes long. I think I've told this story in some video before, but I actually stopped playing Pokemon Sun and Moon because the tutorial was like the whole game. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet had a 3-hour tutorial in my playthrough, and you might say, well, that's such a small part of the game, who cares? Well, how about you sit and stare at a wall for 3 hours then and come back to me? Does over 10% of this game being a button masher sound fun to you? Well, guess what? It's not. It's really not, especially when you've played all 3 Pikmin games like 50 trillion times. Like, oh, red Pikmin can fight fire. I thought they were immune to electricity. I think it's a shame, since Pikmin 1 genuinely I felt had one of the best tutorial systems of any modern Nintendo game. Jeff Compass, the only web show where a 20-year-old game is modern. Day 1 was a bunch of text and letters, sure. You know what, it was like 10 minutes long, man. The second day was basically tutorial 2. It was a straight line of tasks with not much to multitask on, but you probably wouldn't realize it if you hadn't thought about it. And to Pikmin 4's credit, 2 and 3, I would argue, also suffered hand-holding issues to at least an extent. 2's first hour is pretty damn slow, and the story mode of Pikmin 3 is basically an entire tutorial as is. I mean, it's the 4th game. By now, you know how this series works, right? I mean, you find and grow Pikmin and have them move and carry objects. They start as leaves and can be powered up with the power of drugs. Now, in the first game, the main collectible was Olimar's ship parts. Pikmin 1 as a whole was a lot more oriented in being a survival sort of exploration experience. You had 30 days, each day lasting about 13 minutes, and 30 ship parts to find on this planet, divided up between 5 areas. Now, at the time, Pikmin 1 was considered a bit too difficult for the average Joe. There were no rewinds, and at the end of the game, if you didn't collect the necessary ship parts, you died. The whole game just ended. So Pikmin 2 rolled around, and the whole time limit system was essentially removed. This decision ultimately seemed like an answer to the game journalists who found the predecessor too punishing. The game still had a day system, but there was no real restriction or limit on how many you needed. The goal of Pikmin 2, as a result, was no longer to survive, but more so the goal of exploiting capitalism. Money. Money, money, frickin' money. So you weren't collecting ship parts, you were collecting treasures and drugs and Louis. Pikmin 2 made up for the challenge missing in regards to the survival and stress in its caves, which were genuine gauntlets and worst of all, unfair. Pikmin 3 kinda was like 1, but I feel like it's kind of an insult to Pikmin 1. There weren't a set amount of days here, but more so the ability to continue exploring on PNF 404, determined by how many mason jars of fruit juice you had in your reserve. And at a first glance, it seems like this was kind of an aim to replicate the challenge of Pikmin 1, except it really didn't. I mean, you had so many jars of fruit juice that you could honestly start up a Jamba Juice and feed a family of like 86. It was an empty, half-hearted attempt to please both sides of the Pikmin coin. However, of the two factions, and especially in the modern era of this company, there's always one side that Nintendo always has to aim to please. The people who whine and complain when a game isn't PP baby easy. So yeah, you might all be asking, where am I going with all this talk about the Pikmin trilogy and how does it relate to 4? You knew I was going to do this anyways, and yet you still clicked on the video, let's not lie. So Pikmin 4, structurally speaking, is extremely similar to Pikmin 2. Actually, this is less so Pikmin 4 and more so Pikmin 2 2. And Pikmin 3 is more like Pikmin 1 2. At least it's not 1-2 switch. Now we'll get on to what this means as a thesis of this video as the video essay continues on. But I'll summarize what this all means now as a basis to explain the game. This adventure, there's no focus on survival. Here we're back to using our Pikmin to collect treasures. But despite retaining a similar plot to its predecessor, this game takes a pretty different approach to the narrative than Pikmin 3 did. You can actually play the game without being stopped every 2 seconds to be given a story exposition. I know, it's crazy. It's a fairly hands-off approach here. It's simple. You get more treasures, your ship powers up, and you can access new areas. And of course, the biggest new addition to the franchise is Oatchi. Every game franchise needs a dog, right? I mean, we got Chomp Chomp, we got Polterpup, Poochie, and now a dog without a nose. Now, was this done entirely just to sell merch? I'd say yes, but I can't find much of it out there. Oatchi moves a lot quicker than you'd be able to move otherwise on foot, and now on the field, all your Pikmin can bunch up onto him. A lot of people have pointed out this is a bit too easy, but I actually don't mind this change specifically, and found it to be really convenient in terms of travel. It was a huge detriment to the speed and snappiness of, say, Pikmin 2, where the purples were always like 10 miles away from you, especially as the captains became faster in late game. I feel Oatchi makes movement feel a bit more concise, which I do appreciate. When talking to Shepard at base, she gives you the option to upgrade Oatchi with your pup drives, ranging from expanding his moveset to just being faster and stronger. There's a lot you can do with the little guy. You can swim with your Pikmin now, and you can charge Oatchi to get a powerful attack, and then send your Pikmin onto the back of an enemy, which is a little OP. It stands for Oatchi power. And now there's gameplay elements that specifically require him, whether that be smashing bases like Link or going into a little pipe that your captain can't access. Because he's so chonky though, there are moments where only your captain will be able to continue until you can reconnect the two entities. So it's not like you can use him every second all the time. And he also can't climb buildable walls, which, you know, probably not that easy to do with paws, so I don't blame him. But I think what makes this idea so much more interesting than just a really weird Pikmin type is that Oatchi is essentially this game's second captain. He's able to do most of the things your captain can. He can pluck Pikmin, he can whistle and transport them, and have them go here like Pikmin 3 introduced. Oatchi can also take a plethora of commands like smelling out treasures or hell, anything. It's pretty overpowered, but when you're running around the map like a pick idiot unable to find that last treasure, yeah, then Oatchi's suddenly a good boy. Despite this game taking some obvious inspiration from Pikmin 2, I'd say the controls in this game feel very much rooted in what Pikmin 3 brought to the table. Now, this isn't a bad thing necessarily. I am I'm on record for not being the biggest Pikmin 3 fan, if you can't tell by me roasting it every 30 seconds in this video. But the controls in 3 were generally pretty good. They were absolutely different than what Pikmin 1 and 2 brought us, though. I'd say there were 2 distinct changes mostly. Most importantly overall, there was a new lock-on system, which was never a function in the older games. Arguably, this took a lot of challenge out of the game in comparison to the last titles, since the skill of actually aiming your Pikmin was entirely omitted. Most important to me, though, was that the swarm from the predecessors was completely removed in favor of a charge. I feel these 2 changes are pretty critical to the current trajectory of the Pikmin series. It set us on a path where the game developers started focusing more on the quality of life and convenience as opposed to challenge. We're gonna get into this more as the video goes on, but I want you to keep this in the back of your mind going forward. Other than that, the controls are par for the course. A throws, B whistles, L centers the camera. It's mostly fine, but I find them to be a bit awkward at points. For example, when looking at your map at the hub world, to access information, you have to press B. Really? B? Did they have a bad button choice competition at the office? Other than that, holding Y lets you use items now, which we'll talk about a bit more in just a second, but it always feels really awkward to select anything. I always sit around like an old man every time I want to use this feature. Thankfully, you can at least map some commands to the D-pad. I mapped my sprays to up on the D-pad because I am a baller and I like the old games. Although I've talked a lot about 2 and 3 and not that one, there's some pretty interesting differences in gameplay this time around. Starting our adventure, we only have a maximum of 20 Pikmin at a time.
Not gonna lie, I thought this was a hardware issue and not just a game design choice. Please, Nintendo, we really need a Switch 2. Please, that's proof.
You can raise your Pikmin counts throughout the game now by grabbing a Flarlick. I don't get it. What's the joke supposed to be? It's just garlic, but they call it Flarlick. It's so unfunny that it's kind of funny. Instead of being able to take out 100 Pikmin at once on the field, you raise your maximum count by 10 at a time. Now, I've heard a lot of people don't like this, but I think this is actually one of my favorite things that Pikmin 4 does. I feel it's a very nice progression system while not being too overly restrictive, and generally, I feel it's pretty balanced. I was never at a point where I didn't have enough stupid, I hate this name, Flarlicks. Look, here's my main takeaway with Pikmin 4's gameplay. There are a lot of upgrades and power-ups and gizmos and features, and look, it's all cool, but it can even be a bit overwhelming. To buy power-ups for you and even Oatchi, you go to Russ. This is the funniest Pikmin captain ever devised, and he's a beautiful soul, and if you say otherwise, I do not trust you as a human being. Oh man, I don't even know where to start with all the upgrades here. This system kind of began with Pikmin 2. At the end of most caves in that game, you'd fight a big boss and get a prize for the abuse you endured. Pikmin 3 had like 2 power-ups and capsules. I don't even know why they bothered. Here, all the power-ups and new to the series items are purchasable at Russ's the frickin' store. Among the items include the series staple, bomb rocks, which are no longer held by Pikmin, but captains. Gross. I'll be honest and say I didn't use any of these items in the game. I just found them a bit circumstantial and not useful given how many tools you have already. But there's some interesting ones in here for sure, like the ice bomb, which freezes entire bodies of water, and thunderbolts, because, listen, you know what a thunderbolt does. Do I have to have an explanation for literally everything? These are kind of cool, but the main reason you talk to this schmuck is for the upgrades. Among these is the aforementioned charge power. Yeah, this game doesn't actually start with the charge. You have to buy it. I mean, it's cheap, but when playing the demo, I was ready to riot on the streets over the possibility this wouldn't be in the game. Most of the power-ups are directly from Pikmin 2. For example, resistance to fire and electricity, you know, the bull bear necessities. The treasure radar returns, but thankfully it's not as annoying as it was in Pikmin 2. This line was written before a friend told me you could lower the sound in that game, and you know, I appreciate that, buddy, I really do, but I wish he told me that 15 years and 12 playthroughs ago. So yeah, it's just kind of a nice, quiet noise. And then there's the plethora of various abilities, like a better light in caves, the pluckaphone, faster running, but sometimes, man, they just went too far. What the hell is this? A whistle that calls all your Pikmin back to the base? Like, I see the value in it, I'm not questioning why it's good, but it's too good. As a Pikmin veteran, I just felt sick to my stomach over the idea of that. It's like, okay, Jeff, just relax. We'll talk about the difficulty and why it's a big problem when you get to it. So for now, let's just talk about the Pikmin. Let's just talk about the Pikmin. Pikmin 4 goes for the very ambitious and bold approach of having 8 types of Pikmin, which is almost every type from the entire series up to this point.
Everyone is here. Every Pikmin type. All the Pikmin types in the world, right? You know, this game is based off of Pikmin 2, right? We got the caves, we got 2 captains, we got 2 stories, but you think they would bring back the one thing people actually cared about in Pikmin 2, which is the precious freaking Bulbmin, which Nintendo, would it have killed you? You put every other freaking Pikmin in this game, but would it have killed you to put Bulbmin in this game? You know what? I guess it would. I guess if Nintendo put Bulbmin in the game, it literally would have killed them. Their bodies, everyone at the freaking HQ, bodies freaking collapse, because we can't have Bulbmin in the game. No, we can't have freaking Bulbmin. We can't freaking...
Okay, I've taken an Advil and I feel better. We've talked about the majority of Pikmin before on this channel, but we're gonna do it again. Red Pikmin, say it with me. They do 1.5 times the damage and are invincible to fire. I gotta say though, they did make Red Pikmin feel pretty important in this game. There's a decent chunk of fire enemies, there's lava floors, and even an entirely new mechanic. Sometimes there will be stacks of straw blocking things off, whether that be a treasure or a cave. Red Pikmin can pick up these burning pine cones, which run on a time limit before they fizzle out. If you throw it on the straw, it burns. To keep the chain going, there are multiple fire stations that you can light up, and from there you throw them onto the straw or use it to destroy ice or whatever you need. This isn't some insane game changer for the franchise or anything, and I find that there are times that the function just kind of doesn't work, but overall I think it's a cute little addition that I enjoy. Yellow Pikmin, once again, are impervious to electricity and fly higher than other Pikmin being thrown. Well, I can at least say that their role isn't as abysmal as it was in Pikmin 1, but I can't help but feel they feel somewhat underutilized here regardless. For context, electricity in Pikmin 2 would instantly kill your non-yellow Pikmin, which gave this type a very high value. Since Pikmin 3, electricity only stuns your Pikmin, which to me makes the hazard basically a complete non-threat. So yellow Pikmin went from useless to good to existing. Hashtag goals. And finally, the blue Pikmin. Now there's no better way to talk about blue Pikmin than by jumping ahead and talking about the ice Pikmin. You'll see, it'll all make sense eventually. Alright, ice Pikmin. This is really the only traditional new Pikmin type in this game, and it's a great idea. And boy, did these Pikmin ever get utilized, or utilized. Did I mention I'm on the run for tax evasion in 35 jurisdictions? No. The most important function of the ice Pikmin is perhaps predictably freezing water, which gives your squad the ability to just walk over any bodies of water. You can tell when the game developers actually wanted you to freeze the water or not based on the number of ice Pikmin required. 100 Pikmin, okay, message received. Although it's important to note that ice Pikmin I think can still drown, I don't know, this might have been a glitch and it happened during the demo for me, so maybe the game just wasn't finished. Additionally, upon freezing the water, every enemy inside is frozen on the spot, which is a great motivation for doing so. But besides that, ice Pikmin are basically just good for combat. Really good, in fact. Yeah, I went there. Upon throwing ice Pikmin at an enemy, a timed meter will start before the enemy is frozen, and then from there, they go down fast. This function is pretty overpowered. I can't lie, I literally can't. I have a gun pointed to my head, but one small disadvantage to this is that you can't carry back the enemy's corpse back to the onion, which isn't a huge deal as the game goes on, but it's something to consider if you're missing out on the reward in early game when you don't have good numbers. Overall, though, the ice Pikmin are kind of cheap when fighting enemies. You also need them for elemental purposes. Sometimes, or a lot of times apparently, you'll have caves with frozen floors that make other Pikmin cold unless they're riding on Oatchi, or you break the ice blocks in the cave to lower the temperature. It's pretty clear, some might say clear as ice, that ice Pikmin were a big focus for the game developers, and for good reason. It's a new Pikmin, it's cute, and it's a good idea for the franchise, and you gotta sell people on the product. Now back to the blues. When I first saw ice Pikmin, I was convinced blue Pikmin were gonna be basically useless in the game. It was a double whammy seeing this trailer footage. Not only could you freeze water now, but Oatchi meant it was possible to swim over it too. Well, I guess Nintendo had the same concern as me because this game ended up using the blue Pikmin beyond belief. There's so much gameplay in Pikmin 4 that downright requires blue Pikmin. There's a lot of treasures and goodies underwater, there's sprinklers taking up portions of the ground that you have to turn off to proceed, water geysers, and caves that have tons and tons of H2O. Yeah, I needed a synonym there. It's a bit overkill how front and center they are in this game, and you wouldn't expect it, but it makes up for the fact that in Pikmin 3, you get blue Pikmin and basically the credits rolled right after that. Another type of Pikmin that gets a surprising amount of use is white Pikmin. Now, I never thought they were that underutilized in 2. I mean, they were necessary to dig up hidden treasures and take care of poison, which wasn't the most common element, but still prevalent. Well, in this game, there are still buried treasures, but now, or maybe new to Pikmin 3, I don't know, every type of Pikmin can dig them up. I think this is sort of a stupid change, personally. Why take away one of the core features of a Pikmin? And then there's me, who didn't even know that change was made, saw buried treasures, and was like, oh, I'll just come back later when I have the white Pikmin, because I'm a Pikmin boomer and I don't know better. Thanks. Poison in Pikmin 4, especially in late game, becomes extremely common. They even made poison Bulborbs. Even for Pikmin standards, this is nauseating. Random side tangent, but poison is now green and not purple, which kind of throws me off, because you'd think since the white Pikmin have reddish eyes, the old poison made more sense from a color matching perspective. But yeah, they finally finally let Poison sit at the table with the cool kids. I do think Pikmin 4 has a problem though, where a lot of the obstacles feel similar. Take for instance, there's a lot of different walls, each one requiring a specific type of Pikmin. At that point, it doesn't really feel like you're using a Pikmin in a unique way, it just feels like you're matching two cards together. It's tough to describe exactly what I mean, but my point is, things can feel a bit repetitive and monotonous when it's all the same stuff, just with a different element. You know, it's not real puzzle solving, you know what I mean? The remaining Pikmin don't fall into this trap though. Purple Pikmin return, and just like in Pikmin 2, completely break the game. To the purple Pikmin's credit, they are extraordinarily rare here, much less common than even in Pikmin 2. So despite them being overpowered as all hell, I feel it gave me more of an appreciation for the purples I had. At times, I only had like 10 in my battalion period, and I mostly tried not to reset throughout my playthrough. So when I did lose purples, sometimes I just lost them. And I think if you play by those rules, it overall balances the strength of them. Yeah, I said mostly didn't reset. I am not a psychopath. They're almost as useless as the winged Pikmin are in this game. For one, you don't get winged Pikmin until basically the last third of the game. Then what? You get them and they take faster routes when carrying treasure, I guess? I suppose they also lift treasures that are like submerged in mud. I mean, did the developers really create a whole new hazard just to justify winged Pikmin being here in this game? Sure looks like it. They're not offensive, they're just here. It's like a left nostril. It's not offensive, it just exists. And finally, rock Pikmin return. They're your go-to guys if you have to defeat any Wally Wogs. Oh, sorry, Wally Hops. You see, with the Pikmin 1 and 2 re-release, these enemies were completely renamed to Wally Hops. They used to be only called this in the PAL versions of Pikmin. Its latter half of the enemy name is a slur in Britain, and therefore complaining that they changed the enemy name is in bad taste, so I am embracing Wally Hops. Let's go.
So look, we have 7 Pikmin types at this point. That's kind of a lot for the developers to have to consider and balance. So I do feel like some Pikmin kind of fell by the wayside and they really didn't know what to do with everyone here.
The Pikmin standard has always been 100 Pikmin could be on the field at once, and that's about it. In Pikmin 1, that meant you could do 33 of every type, and in 2 and 3, 20. You see, I can do math. But in Pikmin 4, that would come down to only having about 14 of each Pikmin on the field at once, which for a lot of puzzles and treasures just isn't enough of any one type. Not only that, but shuffling between 7 types would have taken a while and potentially could have been confusing for newer players. As a result, at least on the surface, you can only have 3 Pikmin types out at once. I am very mixed on this as a game design choice, and I know that sounds ridiculous, but it's been nearly 4 months since the time this video started production, and I still don't know how I feel about it, even after spending nearly 40 hours in this game. So let's look at both arguments for this change, because it's kind of a huge deal. Starting with the negatives, I feel like limiting the player to only 3 types at once severely limits the puzzle solving and gameplay possibilities on the field. And there's really only one reason why that is. Unfortunately, Pikmin 4 always recommends the 3 types you should have on the field when you're taking out Pikmin for the day. So there's essentially no trial and error, and there's no reason to ever take out a Pikmin type that you don't need. This takes a pivotal element of puzzle solving out of the equation. You don't really have to think about the Pikmin or your environment or make any real decisions then. This isn't something you can turn off too, so it's not like you can see the recommendations and then, unsee it. What if I said to you, there's a purple elephant wearing a tutu in the room, and then I tell you, oh, never mind, just forget about it. Well, guess what? You're probably still thinking about it right now. Yeah, this is one of those quality of life changes that went way too far and really means you have no reason to strategize here. I respect them bringing back all Pikmin types, but I do think they should have probably just limited them to 5. I don't know, red, yellow, blue, ice, and probably white Pikmin I think would have been the sweet spot, along with the additional one we haven't talked about yet. And think about it, if each individual environment could only be designed around 3 Pikmin types, well, that severely limits the game design possibilities for each world. Every world kind of ends up feeling a bit samey as a result in terms of how you approach it. On the other hand, you could probably argue the moments that you actually use an underutilized type are a bit more special or unique to the gameplay, like in caves. And with this game being so long, I think that's a necessity. Pikmin 2 was of a similar length, if not a bit shorter, and they basically ran out of things to do with the Pikmin types by the final world, which wasn't really a problem here. So you win some, you lose some. You can argue that this is all in a motivation to ultimately boost Nintendo's initiative to add as many quality of life features to the Pikmin franchise. For example, now when you leave a cave, you can choose how many Pikmin you want when returning on the field. But in Pikmin 2, you'd have to walk all the way to your base. And speaking of bases, it's based that there are multiple bases. These little pink diamonds indicate to you that you can entirely move your setup to a number of different locations in a given area. I love this. Now, for one, the worlds are so big that having one base per world probably would have made the game borderline unplayable, so they kind of had to. I mean, you could probably argue that this should have been in Pikmin 3. All the Pikmin who are at the previous base even move over. Corpses now stay on the ground overnight, which feels realistic, although they don't respawn now, which feels a bit disappointing, because after you kill everything, the world just starts feeling dead. Whereas Pikmin 2, you're here past day 30 and a giant spider is falling on your dumbass. Here's the thing though, some of these quality of life enhancements help to make this the best Pikmin game, but a few of them are a slap in the face to the veterans of this franchise. I think the worst offender when it comes to this department is the fact that this game now has a mandatory auto-lock feature, taking away, you know, the core mechanic of the franchise, aiming. Pikmin 3 also had a lock-on, but it didn't do it by default. This makes the game incredibly simple. And it's like, okay, Jeff, stop. Okay, you're gonna have your moment, you're gonna have your time to talk about this game and how it's easy. Okay, I know it's hard to not talk about it in the meantime, but just talk about something else. Talk about the gameplay or something. Who cares about gameplay? Getting back to the gameplay, an all-new element to Pikmin 4 are the two new forms of currency. Pokos are dead, the stock market has officially crashed. We have raw materials, which some people say look like gushers, icy diamonds that would break your teeth. You and I are not alike. These shinies can be converted ultimately to build walls and bridges, replacing the old stick bridges previously seen in Pikmin 1 and 2. It's hard not to come across plenty of raw materials, and lots of NPCs give you them throughout the game, so it's hard to really ever say you're in an extreme need of them, but they're multifaceted in use, since this is how you buy items from our boy Russ now. The other type of material, which I will just pretend is new to this franchise, because it is, right? Yeah, it's Sparkulum. Now, this is your primary reward for collecting the treasures, and is how your ship powers up to be able to travel farther. I don't get how that works. I know there's probably some nerdy in-game explanation, but it still doesn't make sense. I don't care what Shepard has to say. In Pikmin 4, you find most of the treasures in Sparklium in the caves. Honestly, I don't actually have a lot of complaints when it comes to these, and that's me saying that. I mean, you know I'd take any possibility to complain if I could. The caves are incredibly well executed in comparison to Pikmin 2, where all the floors were randomly generated. But it wasn't just the RNG in that game, it was how the enemies would gang up on you, the rocks falling from the sky, the bombs that would fall down. Every floor was the literal goddamn apocalypse. The randomly generated nature of the caves, though, means that in Pikmin 2, the experience varies every playthrough. You could get a beautiful layout where you wouldn't have to explore, or at worst, a treasure would spawn out of bounds. Really, no one found this ever in playtesting. Some people really like the randomly generated caves, though, comparing it to a dungeon crawler. And while I get that perspective, having an actual level design and care put into every moment of Pikmin 4, hey, I feel it's just better long-term for the franchise and how people will remember this game. Compared to Pikmin 2, the caves are generally a bit shorter on average. Most caves don't go beyond 5 floors, but what Pikmin 4 does well is give each cave a distinct theme, rather than making every one a gauntlet. If you look at a given cave in Pikmin 2, unless you're a nerd, it's impossible to distinguish Bulblack's Kingdom from the Snagrid Hole. And while there are floors and floor themes that are reused throughout the caves in this game, more often than not, the caves at least have motifs, or something to distinguish them from one another, something I feel Pikmin 2 really failed at. For instance, there's a cave that uses and introduces the pinecone throwing mechanic, which is a brilliant moment of Nintendo game design. The classic, introduce it in a small environment before taking it to the main game. There's a bunch of cute ideas in the mix here. I really love the Seafloor Resort, which takes place entirely in an aquarium, requiring a delicate balance of blue and ice Pikmin. I love caves like the Sub-Zero Sauna, which are primarily ice-based, requiring you to use the ice Pikmin to break barriers and press switches so Pikmin can move without freezing their asses off. Alone, these are not the biggest deals in the world, but these little touches help mold the game design in a way that Pikmin 2 entirely lacked. Pikmin 4 also brings the cave gameplay to the next level with the introduction of conveyor belts, buttons, and fans, you know, the Mario and Donkey Kong staples. I wrote this line before the direct. I guess I'm a professional leaker. Make Xenoblade 4 now. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if these mechanics weren't everyone's favorite new addition, but I feel like this was a bit of a handshake to match the moments like the scale puzzles from Pikmin 2 and 3. And whether or not it worked really well, I thought it was really thought-provoking and really had me considering the ramifications of everything I did. And speaking of Pikmin 2, as if I haven't been doing that throughout the whole video, they did a few tributes to the caves in that game that genuinely worked. There's a whole Submerged Castle tribute cave in this game, named the Engulfed Castle. Now, I know this cave in Pikmin 2 was responsible for causing a traumatic mental collapse of society, so Nintendo said, let's just bring it back for a new generation. Basically, this cave brings back the gimmick of having the infamous water wraith fall from the sky if you waste too much time. This is made difficult because you're only able to bring blue Pikmin into the cave initially, and you still have to deal with fire and poison and all types of nonsense. I mean, this cave was basically a Kaizo trap. The first 2 floors of the Engulfed Castle are basically just the same as the Submerged Castle, down to the layouts and enemy placements.
They put Bulb in it. drop the camera. I'm gonna need a freaking minute. I'm so bad at acting. Oh my god. Alright, you're in my freaking way. So while the first few floors are pretty derivative of Pikmin 2, which you could say was done purposely as a throwback, they do throw a genuine curveball with floor 4, which was at least my first introduction to the game's poison and poison bullwarbs. I still think these are fucking disgusting. Now this cave is a lot easier compared to Pikmin 2's equivalent. I barely even spawned the water wraith, in part because I'm a gamer, but I'm pretty sure as a kid this would have basically been as hard as the submerged castle was in 2. I think for veterans of the series, considering you know what's coming, it's a lot easier to be prepared. But this is still an overall positive, just because of what this will introduce to millions of new Pikmin fans. We suffered, so you have to as well, you youngins. Don't get me wrong, there are still moments of bullshit here. Oh, that's cute. There's the pipe again. Alright, I'm glad bomb rocks aren't in this game at least. Nope, nothing at all can... Okay. Well, I would say moments like this are an actual positive to the rewind feature that this game introduces. In Pikmin 2, let's be honest, we all reset here when losing Pikmin to this scale. Here, instead of pressing the Wii reset button and seeing the title screen and feeling guilty and sad about the state of your life, you can at least just reset from the start. Resetting can be a good thing in moderation, but my problem is when you have to use it for literally everything like the game wants you to. Resetting when you lose 80 Pikmin, fine, fair, you have to anyways. Resetting when you lose one Pikmin to sunset. One freaking Pikmin. Really? One? Like, I can understand if it's 100, but one? God forbid the player faces any sort of consequences for their action. No, everyone needs to feel special and accounted for. You aren't allowed to feel any negative emotions here. Yeah, screw this. Just kidding, I'm rewinding. Yeah, I'm gonna see if I can avoid talking about this easiness still for a little bit longer. So anyways, throughout caves, you'll typically find additional Pikmin, whether in the ground or fighting enemies or in vases, because Pikmin just live in vases, okay? I don't know, man, okay? I don't know. This is important mainly because I found the Pikmin recommendations for the caves to be a bit faulty. I don't think they intentionally lie to you or anything, but once in a while, something falls through the cracks, you know, like the final boss having all sorts of elements, but you barely have any Pikmin that fight them. That, you know, small things like that. I do appreciate being able to come out of the caves with more Pikmin than you entered with, even if it takes away a little bit from the you and your devices mentality from 2. And to be fair, there were occasional moments like that with Pikmin 2, like the Bulbmin or the Queen Candy Pop Buds. But in general, since you can't spawn more Pikmin in caves, I think it's generally a nice feature and just a way to look out for the player. In my experience, this actually made me want to reset a bit less, since I usually knew more Pikmin would be on the way, and it helped me feel a little bit less stressed about the 3 Pikmin recommendation system. Since if something wasn't needed, you could feel safe knowing the game would be sure you were up to date. Also in caves, you can use more than 3 Pikmin. You just can't bring more than 3 in initially, so it's nice to remove that sort of arbitrary restriction. I also feel like the restrictions help sometimes in terms of making the game not too easy. If they don't recommend purples, you may not always feel comfortable bringing them in, and therefore will play as 3 types that don't make the game broken. Or as broken, because it's probably still broken with all the other crap. Also in caves, there's a brand new collectible, human lives. These are called Castaways, with a grand total of 50 being spread out throughout the game. You see, each cave has Castaway models that are interchangeable, so you don't find anyone specifically in a given cave. Rather, the game has a preset order that determines how you find them. I don't know why they did this. In the trailers, I was excited because I thought this was Louis. Once you bring the Castaways back to base, they'll hang around and contribute to your hub world. Well, I don't know if I'd call this a hub world, maybe a hub patch of land. I mean, it's no Delfino Plaza or Soliana or anything. In addition to talking to Rust and Shepard, this is where you're able to talk to the Castaways that you rescue and take care of side quests for them. I'm glad these are here, but a lot of these side quests aren't that player involved. For instance, there will be captains who need you to find a group of people, such as this teacher who took her students and lost them on a field trip. Whatever you say, Mrs. Frizzle. Achieving that quest, though, is basically out of your control, due to the captain order being set. It's not like you can look at a given castaway and be like, yeah, that's the student. I'm working towards this side quest in a meaningful manner. And some of these side quests are just nice little incentives, such as building a certain amount of structures, growing a number of Pikmin, collecting treasures, you know, seeing enemies. In a way, it's the badge system from Pikmin 3 Deluxe, or to put it in terms Nintendo can't stand to use, an achievement system. Not really side quests. I do like the addition, but it can be a bit overwhelming at times just how many captains you need to speak to on the overworld. The text moves kind of slow and it can be a bit repetitive, but it does add enough of a gameplay loop and personality to the franchise where I would absolutely call this a positive to the game at large. It's important to note that before Pikmin 4, we only knew about 3 captains from Pikmin 2 and 3 from Pikmin 3. The Pikmin universe was relatively unknown and unexplored, and it's a nice touch to see how many planets and explorers are just out there. You can kind of tell these were all made
from the character creator, though. I don't think many of these designs are as iconic as Olimar or Louis or the President, but at a very minimum, the Rescue Corps does have some pretty memorable designs. Russ, Shepard, the guy from Saw, and Dingo and Bernard are cool enough, but I'll be honest, I don't remember that much from these guys. Due to how many NPCs there are, it really all started blending in my head towards the end. Not everyone you rescue in these caves, though, is, sane. Sometimes you'll come across what this game calls a leafling. I call it Arlo. When you find a leafling, they usually are just sitting outside of a cave thinking about the weather or taxes or something before you approach them to challenge them to a Dandori battle.
In a game full of fan service for Pikmin, Dandori battles are really the only major thing they took from Pikmin 3, which, fair enough. It's one of two things that game did right. Okay, calm down, I'm exaggerating. Pikmin 3 probably did like 3 or 4 things right, alright?
Dandori challenges are basically just the challenge mode from Pikmin 3, which were by far the best part of that entire package. It's simple. You have a time limit, a set amount of Pikmin that you start with, and from there you have to collect treasures and defeat enemies. You can't bring any of your own Pikmin from the overworld here, they go back to your base, but I wish it was the same for the Oatchi upgrades. Having upgrades like Oatchi being able to carry the weight of 100 Pikmin means often he could be used to cheese quite a bit of loot that I presume probably wasn't meant to be taken care of with essentially one Pikmin. I don't know for sure what the developers intended, so you could either view this as an oversight, a power-up, or my personal favorite, a who the hell cares. To complete them normally, it's not a lot of work. If you just care about getting bronze and basic completion, it's pretty easy, but if you go for the platinum, that's when the Mountain Dew and Doritos start growing from the ground, you start getting a beard, it's the true gaming MLG hours. Harkening back to the days of Pikmin 2's challenge mode a bit, Dandori challenges reuse a lot of assets from the main game, typically taking the same treasures and cave floors and remixing them up. Dandori is super addicting. I think lawmakers are trying to classify it as a drug even. I feel instead of having this just be a separate mode like in 3, including this in the actual story with characters that you bring back to base was a really smart idea. The only thing I'd really say it's negative about it is there's some sort of weird balancing in play here. Some of these took me a while to beat even to get bronze, and then some of them I platinum in my first attempt. If the latter happened, I would feel pretty sad because I want to struggle and grind because this game is so easy on average. Ultimately, Dandori is an example of this game having challenge though if you look for it. It's annoying to have to seek it for yourself, sure, but it does add a lot of replayability to the game. When you win a Dandori challenge, the leaflings are so shocked at how good at the game you are that they pass out and frickin' die. Creep.
Only they knew how many OG power-ups I had. It's like the Pikmin equivalent of being on frickin' steroids.
You also rescue a few leaflings from Dandori battles. These are sort of a combination of the bingo battle from Pikmin 3 and the 2-player mode from Pikmin 2. In the Dandori battles, you have a set amount of time to collect the most treasures and corpses against your opponents. The first 2 minutes start with grinding as many Pikmin as you can, followed by intense treasure collection. Admittedly, I won every single one in the main game on my first try, so I don't think they're all that hard, but if you go for platinum, that again ramps up the difficulty by quite a bit. I didn't go for it because I honestly didn't know you could platinum these until I wrote this, so maybe I'll go back and do that. These gonna be a bit limited in scope and kind of boring. A lot of the same enemies spawn, a lot of the same treasures reappear in the same locations throughout, although the game tries to shake things up. At times, a specific treasure or enemy corpse will be a higher value item. It is always something weird too, like a corpse of an enemy you normally wouldn't even waste a singular breath on. There are also a plethora of items. Most of them are ripped right out of Pikmin 2's 2-player mode, which are fun until the other captain teleports you across the map. When I do it, it's fair and hilarious. When you do it, it's cheap and you are a cheater. I think my least favorite part about the Dandori battles is that you're restricted to seeing only half of the screen, despite the other half of it just being a computer player, which makes the whole section a waste of space. It's nice to have the option to peek at what your opponent is doing, but I would have really preferred if this was just something you could toggle on and off. The game doesn't have any massive performance dips during this or anything, but I do think the resolution lowers a little bit with something being played on the other half of the screen, as well as it just makes the game feel all the more cramped. Pikmin 4, more like Pikmin 4/10 of a damn screen. A few Dandori battles in, the game introduces a new mechanic as well, a sneak bomb. If you get enough Pikmin on it, they'll bring it to your opponent's base, which causes them to lose a bunch of gold. At that point, you can come to their base and take their the batteries, whatever these are, and collect the gold for yourself. Although honestly, I just used the time that this took to hopefully distract my opponent to the point where I could just get more treasures and items. I will say again, Oatchi completely breaks this, because in this mode, you are able to tip the scales on any given item and are encouraged to no less. Like, if you send him after a sneak bomb, he's too good of a goddamn boy, and the other side literally cannot combat it, no matter what they do.
This game is really frustrating. in terms of how easy it actually is.
It's important we take a little break in the review here and take a few minutes to discuss this, as the difficulty is the #1 reason I would say Pikmin 4 is not a perfect game. We can't possibly avoid it anymore. It keeps coming up through this script like acne. We keep getting back everywhere we turn to this is too easy or this breaks this function. Of course, when talking about games being too easy, this isn't an issue exclusive to Pikmin 4, but rather a trend in gaming. In today's world, game developers try to avoid the possibility of the player experiencing negative emotions. There are exceptions, Elden Ring on the farthest end of the spectrum, being one of the hardest games I've ever played. I mean, I could write a whole video essay about the difficulty being dubious there, because you can't possibly please me. Anyways, this too easy trend arguably started with Mario games in the early 2010s, at least as it pertains to modern gaming. Specifically, Super Mario Galaxy 2, which gave us this cosmic spirit. Gee, I wonder who the hell this is. Okay, so Cosmic Daisy, upon talking to her, will take you to the end of the level. The only downside of this is that you don't get any star bits or coins. Oh no, how can you play Mario Galaxy 2 without coins? From there, this led to every Mario 3D platformer and 2D platformers having some sort of beat the game button. Super Mario 3D Land had the Super Tanuki suit, 3D World had its equivalent of that, and so on and so forth and what have you. I think in a bubble though, you could probably argue that these assist modes weren't all that problematic. I mean, at the time, they're still optional, right? And in some games, like in 3D World, if you used any type of easy mode at all, you wouldn't be able to get 5 stars on your profile. Now that may feel like a very small reward, but it was at least something for the people who wanted to beat the game with the challenge the game developers intended. I remember back then there were plenty of arguments and debates about the easy modes. That criticism was still warranted. If you think about it, this was a huge drop-off from the generations that came before it. Look back to the NES, the Genesis, the SNES styles of games. You had no choice but to sit down and grind, even if the repetition was frustrating. There was no easy mode then, and to many players that was the most memorable aspect of their retro experience. Well, I fall somewhere in between these two. I think the 3D World type of easy modes were tolerable, as I said. Players who wanted an easy experience could have it, and players who wanted to ignore it could ignore it. I mean, all is good in the world, right? Unfortunately, as the years progressed, easy modes in games just started to become baked right into the experience. The worst offender of this was Super Monkey Ball Banana Mania, released in 2021, and hey, I reviewed this one before. Man, I have not talked about this franchise in a hot minute on this channel. My bad, Monkey Ball Adventure still ruined my life. Anyways, Banana Mania is a remake of Super Monkey Ball 1, 2, and apparently Deluxe. Getting good at the classic Monkey Ball games was no walk in the park. It required patience, energy, repetition, and accepting Baby is the best character because you can see more of the environment than with the other characters. Beating Master in Super Monkey Ball 1 is one of my proudest moments in the gaming career I have, and same with Monkey Ball 2. Banana Mania, though, made it less of an arcade experience that required skill and more about a linear, can you mash buttons to get to the end adventure. It removed lives and forced every player to play these games in a way that they were never intended to be played as. This sort of change makes the easy mode a disgrace to whatever respective franchise we're talking about. I refer to this trend as the corporatification of video games. Pikmin 4 sadly falls victim to this problem tenfold. I think an argument exists for the fact that you can probably kind of ignore a lot of the things that make this game easy, perhaps in the same way you ignore the power-ups in Mario. I personally still find this difficult though. We've already spoken about how the recommendation system makes it impossible, but let's take a look at some other aspects. The charge is by design unavoidable. You have to remember that the charge in Pikmin 3 was introduced to replace the swarm. And the swarm is in this game, but it's like not until late game, so I'm not counting it as an actual thing, so move on. One or the other is needed in order to command a battalion of Pikmin. But let's say, sure, we're going to ignore an entire button command. Even if you throw Pikmin one at a time, purples and ice Pikmin each make the enemies a complete prank. The closest thing that you can argue is that a lot of the power-ups for yourself and Oatchi can ultimately be ignored by choosing not to talk to Shepard and Russ. And while that's true, there are still moments where power-ups for Oatchi are required for the main world, and vice versa. My point is, regardless of what you use or don't use in your playthrough, choosing to play this game on a quote-unquote hard mode requires so much work on the player's side that it's essentially impossible, unless you're doing a self-inflicted challenge run. The lack of a hard mode is all the more insulting when you consider Pikmin 3 Deluxe had introduced a whole ultra-spicy mode. And look, I never have a problem if people want an easier time playing the game. In fact, I can understand why that's enjoyable. Accessibility features are a good thing in games, and I support them them existing, but they should be an option. Why would you force it upon the players? You have to admit it tainted the product that we waited nearly 10 years for. Look at the bosses, for instance, as I think they serve a pretty good symbol for what I'm talking about. A decent chunk of them come from previous games, and there's pretty cute callbacks here, like the Empress Bullblacks. I assumed this would never come back in the franchise ever, for one reason and one reason only. Here's the thing though, when there are new bosses, some of them can be killed almost instantly, and considering we're all inexperienced with this game, I don't even remember some of the bosses due to how fast they were killed. Now, there's a few in late game we'll talk about later, but in at least the first 2/3 of the game, I think the best boss that brought some good old Pikmin 2 energy was the groovy Longlegs. This fight was one of the first enemies that the game trailer showed off, and to me, it's an easy favorite. When you fight him, the game gives you this super trippy beat, and honestly, it's BS. A lot of your Pikmin die to it, and it feels like it should be out of your control, and maybe I should be complaining about that, I don't know. But in this game, I appreciated it because most bosses were just complete pushovers. Look how fast I defeated the Smoky Prog, a late game boss. I mean, in Pikmin 1, that would have never happened. And you can say the same thing for the majority of the enemies in this game too. There's a solid balance between returning enemies and new ones here, but so many of them are just so easy. The Bulborb used to be a genuine threat in Pikmin 1. You would sit there, grind up your squad, and get ready to fight. And now they basically die in a flash. The hardest enemies, I think, are the ones that you can't cheese, but require Oatchi, such as the Guildmander, which requires you to headbutt the gold off of them and break the gold so you can hit their weak spots a bit easier. Or the Mammoth Snoot Whacker, which... what kind of fricked up name is that? Even something like the sprays that return are completely busted. You can grind for them again if you want, but you get so many ultra spicy sprays just by existing that it's basically a feature that's been made entirely irrelevant. On top of that, they flower all of your Pikmin immediately. And even if your Pikmin lose flowers quicker than in previous games, that's a pretty major aspect of the gameplay loop from old games that's been completely made irrelevant. And again, think about the Ice Pikmin, Purple Pikmin, think about how many items. Think about the rewind system. This is overwhelmingly easy, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that. There's so much to help you that you don't even struggle anymore. For some series, you can argue that a change like this wouldn't be too detrimental, and for a lot of them, you might be right. But Pikmin 1 and 2 are basically all about kicking your ass. It was integral to the idea that you were lost on a planet and needed to find your way back. And look, I love Pikmin 4, but I think it's dishonest to pretend that it retains any of those vibes. And while I am upset with some of the changes here, by the same token, there's a new identity that takes its place that I believe can ultimately be just as enjoyable if we as fans make an active effort to shift our mindset towards it. The game sacrifices the dreary feelings for funnier characters and more lively worlds, and difficulty kind of falls by the wayside with that. And while it's something I'm personally not used to yet and didn't care for it in 3, it feels like an appropriate shift, given the fact that Pikmin themselves are cute, colorful creatures and may have been given more of a funny, cartoonish charm, which we saw in the Pikmin short films. And hey, Pikmin, the traditional challenge might be gone right now, but this game does have its moments, and if you seek that challenge, I do think every fan of Pikmin can be satisfied. And by the year 2041, when we played and beaten Pikmin 5 for the first time, we might even sort of get used to it. But on the topic of finding your own challenge, for years and years, Pikmin fans had always floated the idea of how cool it may be if you could continue exploring at night with potentially added risks. Yeah, this is kind of nothing like that, but it's still neat. So to save the leaflings we find during our adventure, we need to go out and find the cure for the sickness, as if there's anything that can bless the souls of these demented mutants. Okay, so there was one Pikmin we didn't go over earlier, mostly because it didn't fit with the flow of the video, and it's my video, so I can decide that. Meet the Glow Pikmin. So these are essentially the Bulbmin of Pikmin 4. Glow Pikmin are impervious to all hazards, except they can now fly and even switch between captains seamlessly. I like Bulbmin more. I respectfully ask that you don't try to convert me to your religion, but I still like these. In the night mode, you use the Glow Pikmin to protect the Luminol, a giant, yeah, whatever, who cares? Just to protect it. These enemies surrounding them will get the woke eyes and try to destroy them. So essentially, this is a tower defense mode, and I absolutely love it. Here's the thing, I don't think this mode is entirely fleshed out. Some of the early levels are piss easy and dialogue heavy, and it takes a few worlds before it really hits its groove, but if we're talking about implementing challenge back into Pikmin 4, the night expeditions were an effective way to do just that. Some of these last few levels are extremely difficult too, with classic enemies like the Smoky Prog and Beady Longlegs Castaways making appearances. The hardest part of this mode, in my opinion, is growing your Pikmin army. Ideally, you use the small window at the start of the night to bring star bits ripped out of Mario Galaxy to the Luminol to grow more. But as it pertains to getting a full-on army of glow Pikmin, continuing that grind as more enemies come flowing in is a real test of endurance and multitasking. Additionally, there are many Luminol you can activate for another spot to grow glow Pikmin, but let's be real, these are basically just shields to buy yourself more time, at least that's what I use them for. In comparison to the rest of the game, the quality of life changes for this mode aren't egregious either. As said, if you switch between yourself and Oatchi, your glow Pikmin fly all the way towards you, which not only saves time, but cuts down on a lot of monotony. As the worlds progress, the expeditions start introducing levels with multiple Luminols, or I guess Lumini, to have to protect, with the ability to have Oatchi protect one while you focus on another. This may not be traditional Pikmin, but it's still Pikmin, you know, real-time strategy, as opposed to strategy that isn't in real time. Upon beating the night expedition, in addition to slime to revive the leaflings, you get a certain amount of glow seeds, which automatically spawn glow Pikmin to be used in either future excursions or caves during the main game. I never really use these, save for the final boss, but it's still a nice little bonus that helps tie the two modes together and gives the game a sense of cohesion. In fact, let's just stick with the positives of this game for a second. I mean, there's a lot I still like about this game despite my complaints. Let's talk about the presentation of Pikmin 4. It's just phenomenal. I mean, this game is just beautiful. It unfortunately only runs at 30 FPS, which is a bit disappointing, but to its credit, I don't remember experiencing like any frame drops. I quite literally mean it when I say there's detail around every corner. Maybe a bit too much. I love being in the caves and shifting the camera up and just seeing a fan, or being in the Playhouse cave layout and seeing a window. While this world is fairly nonsensical, just like in 2 in terms of how caves are connected, this game brings back that sense of wonder I felt then. Just where the hell are we? We're in some faraway world, like Michigan or something. And I know it's a little silly to dissect, but if my unused film degree taught me anything, it's that nothing in any form of media is placed by sheer accident, and it's worth analyzing each and every second of it. What's most interesting about Pikmin 4 is that it takes the concept of the series taking place on an abandoned human planet farther than any of the predecessors ever did. Now, I do think there was a distinct charm in the old Pikmin games with how subtle the motif was. In Pikmin 1, the concept was always simply inferred, with the most obvious proof just being a bottle in the forest navel. Pikmin 2, of course, took this a lot farther, with real-life products being littered everywhere, and then fake-life products in the remaster. Then you get to 4, and it's like, hey, I could rent this for $100K a month in Los Angeles. This is somewhere I could be.
I know in previous videos I've praised Pikmin 1 for how low-key and hidden the motifs about being lost on the planet were, and while I still value that, I gotta say, I was blown away and just enthralled with how cutesy and charming Pikmin 4's, opposite attention to detail worked. I got tested for STDs the other day and I got diagnosed with being a Pikmin shill. I know I have a problem.
I feel like this concept is so special here that I'd like to take a look at the levels in depth, starting with the Sun Speckled Terrace. We've seen this as far back as the first trailer of the game. The bench we immediately see here is one of the first real obvious moments that humans indeed used to live here, setting the tone for the entire game right off the bat. It's a humbling reminder that you're only 3 inches, or according to a website that I should have never trusted, 1.9 centimeters. It's not the most interesting world beyond that, but it's still a joy to explore. It suffers very much from first level in a video game syndrome, a fatal disease. It succeeds in being grand though, and it makes something like the Forest of Hope look puny by comparison. This is a fully realized and fleshed out Pikmin world on the Switch, and I'm here for it. The next world is Blossoming Arcadia. Now I do want to say I feel this area feels a little similar to the Sun Speckled Terrace, which I'm kind of mixed on. Pikmin 1 and 2 never really had this problem between worlds. With so few levels to explore in those games, I think it was a bit more important to be distinct there, but at least in Pikmin 4, there are 6 worlds. This game is more about cohesion and the idea of stepping stones. The idea, in my opinion, is that Blossoming Arcadia takes place sort of on a path after the Sun Speckled Terrace, as we march on towards Olimar. Cohesion is a persistent motif about Pikmin 4, in more ways than you realize, including the music. One of the biggest complaints about Pikmin 4 I see is the soundtrack, and I personally never really understood the criticism, but I do get why it exists. There is a sharp difference, and I think I'm in the minority here by enjoying it just the same. And that's probably good, because I've been very negative on this game in places people probably
enjoy so we can all shake hands, and I'm sure the comment section will be extremely peaceful and happy. Anyways, Pikmin 1, 2, and even 3 would have more outright hooks and melodies in its instrumentation. This led to those games having some of the best Nintendo songs of all time, in my opinion, whether that be the iconic Forest of Hope song or the daunting Valley of Repose. Pikmin 4 does this a little differently though, taking a page out of Breath of the Wild, attempting to present a more ambient and explorative soundtrack that aims to fit in more with nature and exploring rather than being its own distinct song that you could put in Smash Brothers. I'm not going to say that I outright prefer this to previous games, but I feel at a very minimum it stands on its own and allows the player to feel immersed in this breathing and alive world. Now I won't lie, I can't say there were any songs I specifically remember or think were super iconic, save for a few which we'll talk about in a little bit, but the point I'm trying to make was that it was enjoyable enough that it added to my experience still. Not everything in a game has to be life-changing or the best it ever was in a series to be good. Now I can't say I cared for every piece of music in this game. I felt like the cave music flew way too close to the Pikmin 2 Son of Death of being boring and devoid of fun. And that's probably the highest point of criticism I have for the music in this game though, and besides that, y'all are being too harsh. Anyways, with the music being as I describe it, continuous and explorative, I feel that fits in well with the worlds and general motifs of the game. So the worlds being designed the way that they are works for me as a result of what I feel is a consistent and coherent game design vision. And I sound nerdier and nerdier every video I make, man. Whether or not you like these changes is one thing, but you can't deny that this game is consistent. Or maybe you think I'm just a complete prick, both of which are valid. By far, one of the best worlds in the game is the third, being Serene Shores. What a fantastic level. I mean, seriously, this is a highlight of the entire Pikmin franchise. It again is pretty obvious about what it's supposed to be, a sandcastle that some rotten kid built and abandoned. While it might have been the size of a boot in real life, here it's like exploring an actual castle, which is nothing short of magical. The sandcastle may be great, but equally as amazing is the shores part of the level. For one, blue Pikmin are an absolute requirement here, which feels like an apology letter to Pikmin 3 for very much underutilizing them. This half of the level is still very interesting because halfway through the day, the tides go under, letting you explore and collect treasures without blue Pikmin, if you so want to. I wouldn't say it's a risk-reward type of thing per se, but it's at least something that helps you strategize and decide how you want to manage your day in this area. And it's also just cute to have an area-specific gimmick, which hasn't really been a thing on this scale in previous Pikmin games. Maybe you could argue something like the lily pads from Twilight River, but I prefer my games to be, you know, fun. The atmosphere is just incredible. It's almost therapeutic, and actually therapeutic if your therapist abandoned you
because of the trauma from reviewing bad games.
While this level is still very over-reliant on blue Pikmin, it's something well worth playing, and I mean, you have to play it, but the point is you better enjoy it. But while I love Serene Shores, words cannot express how much I enjoy the next level in the game, Heroes Hideaway. Now, if you've actually watched this whole video up to this point, thank you. Please subscribe, it helps my channel deeply, but also, you may remember this is where Olimar crashed his ship early in the game. I love that you get a tiny sneak peek of this early on. It sets up foreshadowing and lets you know this is the real deal. I'm sure non-Nintendo games do this all the time, but for Nintendo stories, this is like The Last of Us or something. Let us have our moment. Heroes Hideaway is by far my favorite area in Pikmin history. I know this is the least obvious Pikmin has ever been about being in the human world, but it's hard for me to imagine looking at a level like this, exploring it as if you're an ant, and not just feel an absolute ecstasy as a player. This is the sort of game design execution that really helps me to not feel overly sad about the past themes of Pikmin 1 and 2 being minimized. And I feel if this is the direction they wanted to go with the series, there was no better way they could have done it. You see, what Pikmin 4 does really well, as opposed to the previous games, is master the art of verticality. So not only is the base floor a larger area, they also just flesh it out by experimenting with countertops, tables, being on top of a kitchen stove. You better call a health inspector after this. This level also continues a trend from Serene Shores of introducing a new game mechanic. Olimar's dog Moss from the beginning of the game is patrolling the area. So we have Moss ravaging the floor here. It's up to us to kill her, so nope, I can't say that word for a cute little dog. It's, let me think, knock out. No. Put her to sleep. No, we're definitely not in the right direction there. This level also adds a decent bit of the real-time puzzle-solving elements from the caves. Nothing that's all that challenging, but mechanics like the rails and levers and whatnot really helps with getting on top of furniture and gives this level a sense of progression that makes something so big feel manageable. Since you can't access everything at once, you kind of have to do it in chunks. Something I really like about Pikmin 4 that I could have talked about starting with the first world, honestly, is that on average, the treasures really feel like they belong in the environment. You got a baseball being left out in the park, tomatoes sitting in the sink. It
really helps to the game's identity and cohesion. I'm not saying every single treasure is some meaningful contribution to society, but it does give the world a sense of belonging as opposed to Pikmin 2, where there's a battery just sitting out in the middle of snow, because like the person who left it there is a criminal for not following battery disposing laws. They should run to be a politician or something. This caps off perfectly with how you finish this world. You have to collect 3 cards as treasures, which each have numbers on them. You take them to a safe, and what a horrible save. You could probably figure out the code for this just by sitting there and guessing. I asked a friend here to tell me how many combinations there are. I am a YouTuber, not a mathematician, and he said there are only 1,000 possible combinations. So really, you could just sit there all day, entering code, 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 and bam, oh my god, it's Olimar. I never would have guessed. Now, I know I kind of glossed over the fact that Olimar is now a leafling. This isn't our first time seeing him in this state, as basically throughout the entire game, we've been chasing him. Olimar being a leafling is very important, and something I do want to touch on, but just give me a little bit of time as I'm trying to build to something when we have all the facts in front of our face. For now, just know that you fight him in a stupidly easy Dandori battle, you take him back, you cure him, and your work here is done. It's time to go home, satisfied with the good job you've done, and leave behind this mysterious planet forever and ever.
Did I mention this game has a lot of similarities to Pikmin 2? I might have said it maybe once or twice.
So yeah, this is the same kind of fake-out credit scene that Pikmin 2 did, meaning there's still a sizable chunk left of the game to go. At the end of the credit scene, we see Louie, who's taken moss for himself, and we can infer that he's up to his no-good antics as usual. Oh, Louie, that rascallion. On our ship ride back, Oatchi feels sick, and we have no choice but to turn back to go back to the planet. Because he had grown a tail on this planet resembling a Pikmin leaf, essentially means he's unable to leave the planet of the Pikmin. As a result, everyone agrees his recovery is important enough to go back and search for the cure.
You know, I'm glad we have more gameplay, but this feels like sort of a weird reason to go back to the planet. I think this is one point of contention I actually have with this plot. It feels a little shoehorned in, like we're just going back to save a dog. We're taking 40 people back to a planet for one pet? I sound horrible. It sounds so bad. Okay.
Either way, we get more Pikmin gameplay, so I'll say who cares and just be grateful. We'll get back to the plot in a bit, but what's cool is that Olimar is back now and hanging out at base by his ship and willing to tell you a little story about his journey on the planet. I was so not ready for what came next. I assumed this would be kind of a text story or a cutscene or something, but no. Here we have an entire recreation of Pikmin 1 within the areas of Pikmin 4.
You know, I guess this makes it the 3rd time I've reviewed Pikmin 1.
Yep, a good old side mode. Within the first 4 areas of the main game, Olimar's ship parts have been scattered across them after yet another crash landing. Maybe Olimar is just a drunk. Someone take away his goddamn keys. Instead of having 30 days like in Pikmin 1 though, you have 15. And here you play independently of the main story. None of your power-ups carry over from the base game, none of your Pikmin, your Flarlicks mean nothing. It's truly a whole new old experience inside of an already packed game. This side mode is entirely designed as a love letter to Pikmin 1. You collect most of the same ship parts from that game, although not all make an appearance. Oh, but yes, of course, the stupid gifts from Olimar's uncreative hacks of children appear, and you need them to take off. Again, maybe Olimar's pitiful will to live is trapped inside of those diamonds, I don't know. The game designers just couldn't help throwing in some cute callbacks here. For one, the Emperor Bulblax is a boss, giving you the secret safe, and the music is just incredible. For those who are upset that this game goes for an ambient sound design, the developers probably anticipated your complaining ahead of time and gave these 4 worlds Pikmin 1 style music, even dragging over some of the musical motifs from that game. Now, of course, this is still Pikmin 4, and there's some key differences in comparison to the classic GameCube title. Early on, you do get Moss, which serves as Oatchi's replacement, and obviously there are little differences, like building bridges with your Sparklium, and the enemies not exclusive to Pikmin 1. Regardless, I loved all of this still. It gave the mode a really fresh perspective on a classic game. And what's precious is that the worlds don't feel similar between the base game and this side mode either. For example, Blossoming Arcadia now has the pine cone throwing mechanic. It's a neat way to make sure things don't feel too stale. My personal favorite design of this mode is the fact that they opted for 15 days and not 30. This really gave this mode a considerable challenge in my opinion, since I could not feel safe. I wasn't like, oh, I can get one piece a day. It sent a serious feeling of urgency to me as I played, and that brought back those Pikmin 1 memories. Olimar's side journey serves as a really good good answer for those who missed the previous conventions of Pikmin 1, including myself, and it helped scratch the itch a little bit. I'm almost convinced this was meant to be DLC or something. With how games work nowadays, I'm surprised they just said, you know, here you go, a whole Pikmin 1 side mode again, because I think you could charge $10 for this, and I don't think anyone would have been complaining with that price, because this game is already packed to the brim as is. It feels like a love letter to the veterans of the franchise and just people who like a good deal, which I appreciate deeply. Final World does something very cute I wanted to point out before we move on, which is literally implementing the tutorial again as Olimar's first visit here. That is so cute and clever. It's one-to-one with the story, and maybe I'm just overhyping something that's basically a reused asset, but I don't know, I thought it was incredibly charming. Sadly, even when you succeed and get all your parts back, as Olimar leaves the planet, he realizes Moss is suffering, as was Oatchi. Olimar, though, decides to risk his own life to bring her back and keep her safe, but when he does that, his own life support system fails, because this man can never catch a break, okay?
This says everything about Olimar's character, and in my opinion, is one of the best pieces of writing in Pikmin since Pikmin 1. We have Olimar holding off seeing his family just to take care of a dog. I mean, that's incredibly kind of him. Nowadays, people won't even hesitate to almost run you over if you're crossing the street. They won't even stop. So Olimar is better than everyone.
So Olimar dies, and doesn't this look familiar to anyone? I mean, this is literally the bad ending from Pikmin 1. Uh-oh.
Okay, we can't avoid it anymore. We need to talk about the Pikmin timeline, because if you walked up to anyone on the street and was like, oh, let me explain to you the Pikmin timeline, they probably think you're crazy. They might think you need a little help, a little cuckoo, a little crazy in the head. Let's just get down to it, because I'm very normal and sane, obviously.
So yes, as I said probably an hour or 2 hours ago, I don't know where we are at this point in the editing. I'm just assuming I'm sitting at the computer and crying myself to sleep every night right now in the editing grind. Anyways, so as I said probably an hour ago, the story of Pikmin 4 starts by basically retconning the entire franchise. Olimar crashes on the planet and then explicitly says that he encountered and named the creature he finds, calling them the Pikmin. Now you see, that's a major problem if we're analyzing the continuity of this franchise, right? Because it means we either have to accept that Pikmin 1 or Pikmin 4 was his first time meeting the Pikmin, and it can't be both, can it?
Unless he has amnesia.
So we have no choice but to interpret this as a parallel timeline. We have to pretend as if Pikmin 1 just never happened in this universe, and to a degree, that's not unfeasible to accept. I mean, we just experienced a 15-day recreation of the first game. So here's where we're at. Let's say Pikmin 1 never happened, at least not in the same way as the 2001 title. It happened as it did in Pikmin 4, and Olimar suffered the bad ending that was ultimately present in Pikmin 1 as well. And he turned into a leafling, which also kind of happened in Pikmin 1, just without a dog to pluck him out of the ground. So this leads to the next question. Do we accept this as where Pikmin 1 is slotted into the timeline? As in, do Pikmin 2 and 3 take place right after this game, making it Pikmin 4, then Pikmin 2, then Pikmin 3? Well, to tell you the truth, it's actually entirely plausible. We get all this lore dump because Pikmin 4 brings back the series classic Piklopedia and the Treasure Hoard. The Piklopedia being the place where you can read and learn about the enemies you encounter, even interacting with the enemies by abusing them with the vegetables, and the Treasure Hoard is where we can read up and learn about the treasures we collect, and even interact with a few. You can read the new captain's perspectives on the treasures, or Olimar and Louis, and no offense to the new people, but who are you and why should I care? Well, something very interesting can be read on the page for the mechanical harp, which plays the Pikmin 3 title theme. In the log, Olimar talks about how this is a premonition of his future. Now, does this alone confirm that Pikmin 3 has not happened yet? Well, to answer that, it's time that we analyze and talk about some old friends from Kopite, the planet of the explorers of Pikmin 3. These are none other than York, Nelly, and Doug Burnham.
You know, the Hollywood reboots are just never as good these days, are they?
Okay, so at first I don't know why they threw in clones of the Pikmin 3 captains, which is the obvious callback here. It just came off as weird to me and almost disrespectful to the fans. But if we're able to believe the theory that Pikmin 3 comes after this game, it might make a lick of sense, maybe even a smooch of sense. These captains tell us explicitly there's an impending food crisis coming to Kopite, meaning no, as of Pikmin 4, Pikmin 3 has not happened yet. For the purposes of this discussion, I'll jump ahead and tell you that Louis does survive to the end of Pikmin 4. I know, huge spoiler, they didn't kill off one of the biggest Pikmin characters in an E-rated game. This does seem to confirm that Pikmin 1 happened as an alternate timeline, but not the Pikmin 1 we know. Olimar suffered the bad ending, Pikmin 4 is the experience after that, followed by Olimar being sent to the planet with Louis, with Pikmin 2 happening after and Pikmin 3 happening when the impending Kopite food crisis happened. This makes sense to a degree, right? As Pikmin 1 and 2 seem to share
share the same areas, just with repurposed assets. How did all the treasures in caves appear if they were never to be seen prior? It's not like they were gone that long. In this scenario, Olimar was definitely more likely to pick up the bottle cap that sent him back to the planet in the first place, which we know never happened on screen in Pikmin 1 as we saw his entire adventure. Here, there could have been a moment, maybe in the time he spent in the kitchen, when he grabbed the bottle cap. And because there seems to be treasures and caves everywhere on this planet, it was consistent when Olimar came back to find just as many caves in other areas. This theory also explains the dolphin, how it's back in circulation, which couldn't have been possible after it was sold for parts in Pikmin 2, and checks out with Olimar saying in Pikmin 3 this is the third time that he's been to this planet. Now you may think with Louis being evil, Olimar would have cut ties with him and called it a day. Now this is where things do get a bit shaky, but I think we have to accept that Olimar and Louis basically took two separate rides home. Or maybe because Olimar is just an ass, or Louis didn't pay for gas money. Olimar showed up second here though. Louis was at the company corporate meeting, whatever this is, and in a rash decision, the president ordered Louis to go back. And Olimar, just being a simple working man suffering at the hands of capitalism, had to suck it up and listen, even though it's obvious Louis is fucking evil. And there seems to be a secondary piece of supporting evidence too that Pikmin 2 hasn't happened yet. Olimar, in one of his voyage logs, says he dreamt about Louis bankrupting the company by eating the golden pick carrots, and the president. Ugh, gross. Okay, but while this is a dream, Olimar laughs at the scenario as it's unrealistic and it wouldn't have happened.
So there you have it. It's Pikmin 4, then Pikmin 3, then Pikmin 2. Very logical, and that's obviously where the story stops here. Except...
So why does Olimar act like white Pikmin and purple Pikmin are new in Pikmin 2, as well as the game's plethora of inhumane enemies? Is Olimar on crack cocaine? Is he on some sort of medication? Why do the onions merge into 1 in this game, but not in 2? And then they merge again in 3? Why does Olimar say the word sperm in the Piclopedia? Why does Olimar know that Bullman exists now, but not later? Also, Olimar directly says that he had a crash landing due to a meteor. So is this his experience of Pikmin 1 in the past? Or are we just to accept that this guy crashed his ship like 5 times? We're just sitting there, Nintendo's spoon feeding us a bunch of bullshit. Well, I think there's one definitive answer here. Because this franchise takes place in space, there seems to be an interdimensional rift in the space-time continuum, causing alternating timelines impacting the entire landscape of the universe. One timeline is the Captain Olimar from Pikmin 1 timeline. He crash lands, and Pikmin technology develops in the appropriate manner. Olimar meets Louis for the first time in the start of Pikmin 2, and they get lost again in 3. In this timeline, Pikmin 4 isn't canon, but Pikmin types like Low Pikmin, Oatchi, and Ice Pikmin still exist, as evidenced by the end cutscene. The second timeline is the rift in time where the crash landing led to the events of Pikmin 4, which continues into Pikmin 2 and 3. In this timeline, the events of Pikmin 1 aren't canon, and the Pikmin 1-like experience takes place. Whichever one you believe is a personal choice, but both are equally valid as equally invalid. But simply put, both cannot be in the same universe due to pivotal contradictions. Anyways, let's just wrap this up. Firstly, before we talk about the 2 final worlds, completing Olimar's confusing interdimensional bullshit takes us to a completely new leafling, the Sage. I don't think this guy is anyone relevant, and I'm too tired at this point to analyze it further, so let's just call him the Sage and move on. Or you know what, I have 0 proof for this, but I'm just gonna say he's the president because I'm mad Nintendo never has had him ever return. The Sage takes us to an extremely challenging set of 10 Dandori challenges not accessible anywhere else in the game. This is again one of the highest points of Pikmin 4. Even clearing these on bronze was an extremely daunting task that took me many hours. Floors that you think will be incredibly easy will be your new home and obsession for the next 24 hours. Talking about some of these in depth would be a disservice to this mode. I highly recommend you try these for yourself. But it's proof that Pikmin 4 can be a challenging experience, but you just can't expect those moments in the main game. The veterans just have to look a little bit further. Which, look, I'm not defending Pikmin 4 being easy, but just remember that this isn't entirely an issue. Platinum this mode and then look at me in the eyes and say this game is too easy. And it's not only worth doing it for the classic Pikmin experience, but the prize upon completing this. You unlock coveted white and purple onions, meaning they are no longer exclusive to the caves, and for the first time in the series, you can grow them on the main field like any other Pikmin. This is late enough in the game where I don't think it actually poses any problem to the game's balancing, and being able to grow purple Pikmin makes the gold bar treasure, you know, not a complete and utter grind fest like in Pikmin 2. I guess I should know that every Pikmin in this game does have an onion. A lot of them are presented as cave exclusive, but also 7 Pikmin types can merge into one onion, and there are even multiple possible onions for you to find of any given type. This system as a whole is pretty revolutionary for the entire Pikmin franchise, and I thought it was very well implemented. If there was only one location to find a Pikmin type, considering how big these worlds are, you very realistically could go a long amount of time without seeing a Pikmin type, which to be fair, still happened to me with the winged Pikmin, but they're useless anyways, and I'm a clickbait YouTuber, so we're just ignoring it. That said, there are 2 more worlds to explore after the first credits sequence, the first of which is Giant's Hearth. There are a lot of big enemies here. This Wally Hop, it's a Pikmin 1 fan's worst possible nightmare. But hey, Pikmin 1 never happened, so you should be just fine with it. This area is what I think is the backyard of the house, being sort of a barbecue location spot. Now I want a good old steak. Fitting in with that theme, this is the first area that implements the pine cone throwing mechanic in the overworld as opposed to the cave. I actually really like how it plays out here. It took me a few days to find it, so while exploring and experiencing this place for the first time, I got to know the location pretty well, meaning when I eventually did find the burning pine cone, I got a second go around at mechanics and areas I was already familiar with. There's also platforming with Oatchi. Never do that again in Pikmin, please. I don't have that much to say. I do think it's probably the least memorable area in the entire game, but that's not that much of an insult because this whole game is basically a banger, and I'm just glad they gave us more content than the usual 4 worlds and go home experience. Our final world is the Primordial Thicket. Yeah, I don't know what a thicket is either. I think this is the first real poison-centric world in the entire Pikmin franchise. There's a lot of goop spots, and I do find this world fairly challenging, especially since the mud I mentioned earlier is present in a few locations. I love this trend from Pikmin games. Always the last level is orange and autumn. It works so well and presents the perfect foreboding feeling. This level doesn't really do that much new, to be honest, and as a result, it can feel a bit exhausting at the end of a long adventure, but by the same token, I'm not going to complain about more gameplay for Pikmin, but also by the same token, let's wrap this up. We run into Louie, fighting him in one final Dandori battle, also still easy. Here's where we meet Brittany, Brittanelli. She's the one who knows how to save Oatchi, because she's a veterinarian. After this battle, we locate one final cave that doesn't appear prior to that conversation. Meet the final cave of the game, the Cavern for a King. This is a 24 gauntlet, with most floors being pretty challenging boss fights, new and old. There's also some really cute ideas thrown in here, like using airways to shift between each side of the Empress Bullblacks, with nowhere else to go to protect yourself. This is by no means an easy cavern, and I think it harkens back to the game design of Pikmin 2 a bit, debatably more so, as the longest caves in that game didn't even reach 15 floors. We even fight the Smoky Prog here, one of the biggest threats and creatures of myth from Pikmin 1. Yeah, it dies in 3 seconds here, okay. But all in all, a great cave and a downright phenomenal and memorable way to end this game. Our final obstacle, of course, is Louie, who is riding a Meet the Ancient Sirehound, which I would refer to as Pikmin 2's boss fight if actually done right. Now, I will say this is a pretty long fight, and it can be a bit exhausting, but the spectacle of it, along with the music, elevates this fight to a new high for the Pikmin franchise. Seriously, I cannot stress enough how good this song is, and it's nothing that's ever been done with Pikmin before, with like sharp bleeding guitar riffs. Seriously, it's a banger. Go listen to it. I wouldn't say this is an easy boss either. I had multiple attempts where I lost a majority of my Pikmin, and a few times I wanted to punch the wall.
Don't worry though, I kept my cool. I'd never do anything like that, ever.
The whole final world, the Primordial Thicket, the Cave of Heroes, the Sirehound, all lead to what I would say is a pretty much perfect finale to this game. We rescue Louie, who gives a few more side quests if you come back after the second credits, but more importantly, because screw Louie, we save Oatchi. Moss, though, cannot be saved, with Olimar accepting that he needs to leave her behind on her home planet. It's a happy little ending, but don't get too happy. Pikmin 2 is right around the corner for you, Olimar. You're not seeing your wife and kids anytime soon.
And that's Pikmin 4. I waited for this game for a long time, so it's really surreal to not only have played it, but made a YouTube video about it that people are actually going to watch. Hopefully. So with that, let's go into the conclusion territory and see how this stands to other Pikmin games. I'm not ready for it to be over, but we gotta move on.
Look, Pikmin 4 does so much right. There's a great amount of quality of life features, the presentation's fantastic, and the gameplay, overall balancing, and side content is unmatched at this point of the series. It takes a lot of the best from the first 3 Pikmin games. There's a whole recreation of Pikmin 1, there's Pikmin 2 as a very heavy point of inspiration, and they took the challenge mode from 3, and even the aesthetics and charm that existed in, hey, Pikmin. There's so many pivotal additions to the franchise here, like the character creator. We got Ice Pikmin, Oatchi, the night mode, the final world, and the Sage's Dandori caves. So we have to ask ourselves, does this outweigh the negatives that we've talked about in depth throughout this video? Does this game
game being too easy really ruin it? I have a theory with the Pikmin franchise that every Pikmin game just has to have a pivotal flaw. I don't know why this is the case, but it seems to always happen. Pikmin 1 was very short, and at least in the earliest versions was very glitchy. Pikmin 2 had chaotic game design, Pikmin 3 was too linear and safe, and hey, Pikmin exists. Pikmin 4's greatest flaw, though, you could argue, is the least or most offensive of all. It feels the least like a Pikmin game. I would say, though, that this isn't Pikmin 4's doing entirely. Pikmin developed a firm identity with Pikmin 1 and 2. I've referenced it probably a dozen times by now, but they were dark, grim outings that barely cared about you as a player. As we've come to conclude, Pikmin 4 is none of that. Is that Pikmin 4 alone to blame, though? Pikmin 3 has a very light, upbeat tone to it, and there's not a lot of serious moments there besides the stakes of the story. Hey! Pikmin Blue, and the short films, all arguably made to promote the franchise, were cutesy and low stakes as well. Whether you like it or not, Pikmin has been missing that edge for nearly 20 years now. Referring back to Mario again, I always had a problem with Super Mario 3D World and how linear it was. It's a great game, don't get me wrong, but it's such a drastic difference from a game like Mario 64 or Sunshine. I preferred the exploration and detested the linearity being shoved into 3D Mario. The thing is, though, elements like the get to the end of the level trope began to be more commonplace not with 3D World, but with Galaxy, which were the most linear 3D Mario games at the time of release. These are trends that start early, and we can't pinpoint it to one specific game. Granted, we can agree that no Mario game is bad, as is no Pikmin game is bad. It's just a matter of what each person prefers, and by now, there's probably millions of Pikmin fans that value the new direction of the franchise. I made a poll asking what everyone's favorite Pikmin game is prior to the release of 4, and 3 overwhelmingly won. I think I'm just old. Here's the thing. Pikmin do like Pikmin as it stands in 2023. People liked how it stood in 2013. And despite being a veteran of this franchise that loved 1 and 2, I still love 4, and I see why others do as well. What works most against Pikmin 4, in my opinion, is the fact that they called this game Pikmin 4. When you number it and put it in the same line as other games, by nature, people will compare it endlessly to those titles. There's a reason that game stopped being numbered at a certain point. It's why Mario Sunshine wasn't Mario 64 2. It's why Majora's Mask isn't Ocarina of Time 2. The developers wanted you to treat it on its own accord and not immediately prompt comparisons. They didn't give Pikmin 4 that luxury. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I do think Pikmin 4 is the best Pikmin game. So to a degree, maybe they didn't have to care about that. Maybe from their perspective, they wanted this game to be so good that it didn't matter if it was different, the positives were just bound to outweigh any comparisons. Pikmin 4 is ultimately a reboot, whether we accept it as one or not. The whole plot analysis was not only a very funny bit, there's a reason I spent so much time analyzing where this game stands in the Pikmin universe. If you go into this game thinking it's a reboot of Pikmin and something new, you can accept it as something different. Maybe you'll still have problems with it in comparison to 1 or 2, sure, but you can at least see it as its own entity. Perhaps you can shift your view to less of a survival strategy game and more of a joyous adventure title with puzzle elements. I love both. Pikmin 4 has brought so much joy to me and to so many other people that I can't sit here and say the negatives really ruined the whole game for me. Yes, this game is too easy. Yes, it's an absolute goddamn mess of a story. Yes, Olimar says a bad word. But it's such a fun game with so much charm and love and care and put into literally every corner. At the end of the day, I can look at the negatives and say to myself, who cares? Although, I don't think caring is wrong either. When you wait 10 years for a game to release, there are expectations that naturally arise. You can't have something in development for that long and please everyone. It won't happen. Just as I accept every time I have a video with this sort of opinion, not everyone's gonna agree or be happy. I also just don't mind if a game is too easy sometimes. Look, life is stressful, and once in a while, it's nice to kick back after a long day at work and play a game that doesn't kick your ass in. It's a big reason I was unable to get into games like Elden Ring or Cuphead. After an exhausting day, I find it hard to justify playing a game that I can't make progress in and need to sit down and grind and practice. I'm not saying that style of gameplay is bad, and I do enjoy it with the right mood and energy, but my point is that a game being easy doesn't make it bad in the same way a game being hard doesn't make it bad. I have been going through a very exhausting time in my life the past few months, and it was nice to know I could go home and just turn my brain off a bit and play a video game with no stress. And there's so much content in it, and this game is just a near perfect experience to me despite its flaws. But all to ultimately, I can't bring myself to say it's perfect either. I think there are valid criticism, and those were the things I brought up throughout the video. You know, it's funny because I compared this game to Banana Mania earlier, and I'm doing it once again. But looking back to my experience and review of Banana Mania, I thought that game could have been a perfect Monkey Ball game if they gave it a few updates. I'm not saying DLC, I don't think either really needed it. I'm just saying a few tweaks, you know? In the case of Pikmin 4, I feel like they really should have made a hard mode, and maybe they still will. I don't know, Metroid Dread got one after like 6 months. Anyways, I think if I keep going in this circle, I'm just rambling, so I do want to wrap this up. What I do want to say though is that Pikmin 4 is a phenomenal experience. It's what Breath of the Wild was to Zelda, what Mario Odyssey was to Mario, Xenoblade 3 to Xenoblade, Kirby Forgotten Land to Kirby. It's a special, unique experience. So no, it's not perfect, but at the same time, it may as well be. The road to Pikmin 4 was painful, but I think there was something special along the way that developed. A true fan base for the series. So many people banded together on Twitter, Reddits, YouTube to ask where this game was. It became sort of an urban legend, that Nintendo game that was announced and forgotten about. While it may have been a painful wait, we all formed beautiful and funny memories together as a team. It's like when you and a class of 20 other people have a horrible teacher in school and you feel like it's you versus them and you really bond over it. It made the game and the wait all the more memorable. And those memories, whether you like or hate the game, those are memories that we're going to take with us the rest of our lives. This experience of Pikmin 4 pre-release and playing it is a reminder of what life is. There are good points, bad points, but you have to savor and cherish the good times that do exist. And now I'll look back on Pikmin 4 fondly as I move on and play other video games. It's always fair to criticize a product, but when it's as good as this is, it's hard for me to really hold this game in contempt. It's more than a game to me. It was special. It was a life-defining era and event that grew my YouTube channel and grew me as a person too. As a patron of the art of gaming, Pikmin 4 changed my life. I will always consider it a masterpiece, not just as a game, but for what it represented.